Hello and welcome to Following on County Cricketer. I'm Jon Norman alongside Nick Friend and George Dobell from the Cricketer Mag. No Harmy this week, but he'll be back next. He will also be part of our talkSPORT commentary team for the first Test match up in Headingley next week. We will be broadcasting the entire series on the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel if you live overseas. We're not going to be talking about that series that much. We're going to be talking about county cricket as we do, T20 stuff, and all the other stories that have come out of the county season so far in the last week or so. Pleased to say George is back. Nick's ever present, thankfully. I'm here as well, and this is Following on County Cricketer. George, good to see you, and you, Nick. We enjoyed our time yesterday, didn't we? Very much, Nick, at Lord's.
We did. Very pleasant.
George is back from France, I think. Let's start. We spoke last week about the proposed changes to the county championship. You've just released an article in the last 24 hours about the three options. In fact, I was just chatting with Ollie Pope about it. I just put that in there. So where are we?
You can tell us what he said? Or...
Yeah, I could tell you what he said. I could tell
you.
Go
on, then.
Go on.
He said he thinks that there shouldn't be a reduction in the amount of cricket played in a summer. He thinks that. So there you go.
Good for him. To be fair, that's largely Surrey's view as well. I think Surrey have suggested that they would be happy with an 8-team top division in the championship, which would see 7 games home and away. It would create some confusion in Division 2, perhaps, but I don't even think that's one of the options that's going to be taken forward. So look, before I say anything else, Normo, I think I have to say they haven't actually decided at the time we're talking what the 3 options are. What they've decided is that they will decide them tomorrow. Okay? So this time, well, by the time this is released, we'll probably know for sure what the 3 options are. I can tell you what they're looking at right now, and there's a little bit of variance in each one, but you get an outline idea. But I just want to give that caveat in case anything becomes outdated. The three ideas. One of them is a Bob Willis Trophy encore, which is basically conferences. People will remember that there were 3 conferences. You qualify for semi-finals and the final, so the championship would be decided that way. It's 12 games. That is one option. One option remains divisional with promotion and relegation in something akin to what we have now. But Nick will tell you it's like the Scottish Premier League football. It splits halfway through the season, apparently. I didn't know this. And the top teams play off for the title, again with finals, semi-finals, and all the other teams play for positions. The benefit of this being, again, that there are 12 games and that there are, I don't know what the benefits are. Promotion and relegation is retained. There's some argument about how many teams should be in the top division. Anything from 8 to 11 being talked about, really, even 7, I think. So that and the other option is harder to explain, but I think the favourite. There are 3 groups of 6 teams, and groups A and B play each other. Okay, so you get they play the 6 teams in the other group, so you home and away, so you end up with 12 games. Then you play for semi-finals and final, or just the final possibly, and you also can have. Then the 6 teams in the bottom group, okay, they play each other only, but 2 of them can be promoted a season. It might be that there are playoffs between the second team in the bottom group and the penultimate team in the top groups. Okay, that's basically it. I think anyone listening to that will be more confused than they were a minute ago. But if you read the piece, I think it's a bit less complicated, and I'll do a full rundown of all the options.
It's worth saying, like, it's a funny one, that one, because it's difficult. It is not easy to explain, but it is actually quite straightforward. If that makes sense, like there
The benefits are more, well, it's clearer, and it actually is, yes, I think it is easier to understand.
The way I'd
Promotion and relegation, 12 teams can win. And while at first glance you think there's a rump of 6 teams that can be left behind, if a third of them can be promoted each year, actually they're not necessarily be left behind.
the way I would describe it is as a 12-team top division split into two, and a second division of 6 teams. I think that's because actually that's the effect it has, even if it's not what it looks like. You play half of Division 1 twice, essentially, presumably on a seeding basis. So you're not playing it's not top half and bottom half. You'd be playing second, fourth, sixth, eighth, 10th, and 12th. That's one group, and then the other group be 1 to 11.
John looks very confused. I think he looks confused. We know. Let's level with the listener. He's had a bit of tummy trouble. It could have just been
No.
but you did look very confused, which is a bad sign. And anyone listening is going to be thinking, why, in God's name, make these changes? Because none of them are ideal. I think we should be honest.
No.
Can I just say two quick things? Firstly, that
Mm.
was my maths face. Secondly, I haven't had any tummy trouble. Thirdly, how do you decide who goes in which group? And will we
They're
be
seeded? That's the least of the problems.
Oh no, well,
let's cross that bridge in July.
Right, okay. Well, remember, we're not just talking amongst ourselves here.
So I think but I think you're right. I should have made that clear.
So the final positions of this year's county championship.
We're not there yet.
Well, no.
It might be the last 3 years. It could be this year.
No, but can
really?
I say though, I think it needs to be this year, because I do think the one thing that needs to happen, the one thing that does need to be reflected in next year's. I don't think as a game it's healthy to tell everyone what they're playing for to begin the season with, and then to hit them in July with news that Leicestershire's reward for winning Division 2 could be being in a smaller Division 2. That's not that is not. There's no. We're talking about trying to produce competitions with greater sporting integrity. That would not be a good start.
It's a good point.
And I think you'll lose a lot of. I think it would lose a lot of credibility and a lot of warmth, if that's the right word. Probably not warmth, but a lot of, willingness to come along, I suppose.
No, you're right.
At the outset,
I think that's a very well made point. But people, I was going to say,
who cares what people did 3 years ago?
Why we're tying ourselves in knots, looking at these options, and it's basically because what we have now isn't very good. I think most people would accept that it's not ideal, and they think that it would help if there's a bit less cricket, but also that they want to rebrand and have a championship that they're really proud of, that everyone can understand and get behind, and both is entertaining, has jeopardy, produces players.
But hang on, I'm just looking at Division 1 right now of the county championship, and I'm as invested in the county championship as I've ever been. And there is 61 points that separates top with bottom. There isn't a team that hasn't won a game this season. There's only one team that hasn't lost a game, and they're not even top. This is just a vehicle to try and reduce the amount of cricket played.
But hang on. Sorry. This is not a decision that's been, changing the schedule is not something that's come up in the last two. They've not. This isn't based on on how the competition has gone this year. Like it's based on the fact that the schedule across the board has been, frankly, rubbish for years. Like it's not
100 years. It's been.
Yeah, but
it was brilliant in the opening years of this century.
But the point being, this isn't about. No one's saying this isn't about that. How exciting this year's championship has been. Every bit as exciting as the championship has been, the Blast has been fairly underwhelming, and no one's been going. So
we haven't even started talking about the Blast. But that's a reduction as well, though, isn't it?
Almost certainly, yes.
But I think
the trade-off there. By the way, these aren't my views. I'm just trying to report. The trade-off is that the schedule will allow those games to be held at more appealing times.
Meanable time.
More games on Fridays.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Or Sunday, or Thursday for some of the London. But So that's the trade-off, because at the moment you've got a really crappy schedule, to be honest, with the Blast. You might host 3 home games in a week. You might be hosting games on Tuesday afternoon or something.
Yeah.
During school time. So the trade-off there is that yeah, you might have one fewer, and I think it will be one fewer home game, but hopefully you'll be able to attract more people to go to it, and actually it will turn out to be financially better.
Although I imagine if you're going to be restricting the amount of days that are played, you're going to have more of the situation that we have where Sussex will play on a Friday night and then they've got to be in Somerset for Saturday.
No, the opposite. I mean, the whole idea is that, and certainly from a player's perspective, that those who are in favour of a reduction of some kind, and by the way, that is the vast majority, it all comes from that place, knowing that if there is some kind of reduction in cricket, it's not just the days cricket you get back. Remember, it's the travel days. So if you reduce the Blast, for example, by 2 games in the group stage, by the way, it's only the Blast and the IPL that are 14 games long anyway. If reducing it by 2 days by 2 games, theoretically gets you 6 days back, or should get you 6 days back, because
but those days, if the games are pushed so they're just played on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're going to be playing.
But if they're pushed to predominantly Friday and Sunday, and then you've got a few teams who prefer Thursday and Saturday, it makes it far easier to schedule a slightly smaller competition in the same window while giving teams a travel day in between. And that is
the broadcaster will have to be satisfied, reasonably enough in my view, so that there will be games every day of the week still, probably, or almost. I mean, if they're going to show them, they can demand that they have cricket to show. So, they probably won't get every game where they want it, but they might get 3 of them. And that's a step forward from where we are here. I'm not saying this is what I would want, by the way. I'm not meaning to.
No. We're just
trying to
chatting
explain where we are. And yes, they do want there to be less cricket. Whether that's the only, it's not the only consideration. There's also an understanding that the current championship structure, look, it starts early in the season where it's a bit of a lottery. Super this year, to be fair. And not everyone plays everyone home and away. So there's an element of chance and a lack of integrity in that regard. If they can improve those things, they will still have a struggle, I think, to explain it to county supporters and members who aren't really getting any meaningful consultation.
And less cricket for their money.
And less cricket for their money, yeah, that's right. It's not a particularly wonderful combination, is it?
And this idea of 2 leagues, you described it well, Nick. 2 leagues, 2 6-team or a 12-team league split into 2 with another. That is very difficult to explain to someone who's not invested in cricket.
No, I completely agree. And as George said at the outset, I would describe these are like skeletal versions of proposals. And what I think we'll end up with actually is the best bits of various bits of them merged into one. I think where they have to reach is.
You have faith.
I wouldn't go that far. No, I've got hope, because I do think something needs to change.
When you say skeletal, you're right, but they will decide 3 tomorrow.
Yeah, no.
And then from there, just to give you the timeline, John, they'll go back to the counties, discuss them in groups with 3 counties or whatever in each group. And they hope to, then there'll be a meeting at the start of July where they hope to have a consensus, which is then taken to the professional game committee or whatever it's called, who will make suggestion to the board, a recommendation rather to the board. The board, ECB board, will sign off on it in about a month from now. So while it's a bit skeletal, and there are.
Do you know what I mean? Like I think what will happen is there'll be bits taken from. What I mean is there'll be tweaks to these proposals.
There might well, but the point is we are near the end.
Yeah,
I honestly think we'll be there in 5 weeks. We'll know what the season structure is.
Let's carry this conversation on. You are joining us here on Following on County Cricketer on talkSPORT 2 and the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel in partnership with cricketer.com. This is Following on County Cricketer. We're talking about the changes to the county season, which are set to come in 2026. And George, suggests that a decision will be made within the next month about the destination of travel. Nick, you were just, I just cut you off. What were you saying?
No, I think it was just on the back of your point, which I think is completely correct, and that the challenge they're going to have among all the other challenges here is, I think they need to try and, I've said from the outset of this, I've been banging this drum for about 18 months, to be fair, and where they need to get to the point where they can make the maximum impact while being as unradical as possible. Because, as you said, there's not an enormous amount there for supporters. Reducing cricket, there's no from a supporter's perspective, there's no good bit to that. So you need to do that in a way that remains easy to understand and remains palatable. And what you don't want to do is alienate people by reducing the fixtures, but then also replacing what we've currently got with something that people can't understand. One of the issues we've got at the moment is that it is, as Cam Ponsonby, a colleague of all of us, has often said, all three formats, all three competitions are in some way corrupted. The Blast has a 50-day break between its group stage and its quarterfinals. So all the players who got you there are gone. The Championship begins in April, ends in September, which is all fine, but you don't play necessarily your closest rival twice. The One Day Cup is actually somehow the least corrupted, and yet is still played without half your squad. So we're starting, as George says, from a very low base, from a schedule that does not work properly for best v best or for narrative. What they need to get to is a place where you've got a really good sense of best v best, but also a sense where the narrative remains for as long as possible, which I would say is why I'm pretty against the conferences from a start. The reason the conferences worked in the COVID year in 2020 is because we had a month, 2 months to play the season, and frankly, no one was in the mood for relegation. There'd been very limited build-up for players. Fans couldn't go along. It was a chance to get 5 games, if you remember, it was a chance to get 5 first-class games in for each county, with a final to say there was a winner of this best case of this work, of this sort of making the best of a bad situation competition. Now, conferences will be voted for, I'm sure, by the smaller, less good at red ball cricket counties, who see it as a chance to remove relegation and to be on a level playing field with Surrey and the like. And they'll be told you can all win the championship. And sure, in March they all can. But by the end of April, you'll have 5 or 6 counties who've lost 3 in a row, who can't win the championship, and spend the next 4 months plodding along playing for nothing. And we might be told there's more prize money involved and there's some seedings involved for next year. But quite frankly, that has nothing for narrative, very little for the supporters. And beyond the playing staff and the prize money, there's not really that much there, is there? So I don't think that is a good option at all, personally. I think it's got to be divisional.
For what it's worth, I agree that it's the least likely option to be taken up.
I think divisional is where you create something that is, look, all of English sport is divisional, isn't it? Conference is an intensely like American sporting system. I think we love in English sport in general, we love the jeopardy that it brings. There's no franchise stuff here. There are no big money owners who want the guarantee of being in Division 1. Like, you've got the chance to make sure. And the good thing about that divisional sort of 2, parallel top tier followed by 16 second tier, what that does quite well is it means that there's a lot of movement at the end of the season. You'd have semi-finals and a final to see who wins. You've got 2 teams being promoted, 2 teams being relegated. That's almost half your counties are undergoing some kind of change or situation at the end of the season. And what it also does is, because of that, it keeps more teams involved till the end of the season. I think that's important. And because it's 6 teams going up from Division 2, I don't think you feel marooned as a Division 2 county in a way that you might do if you were in a Division 3. And it's obviously quite noticeable that, George hasn't mentioned that there's not a 3 divisions of 6, Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. As far as I'm aware, that's not on the table, because that just wouldn't get passed, because no one wants to be 2 divisions away from Division
1. So in all of this, if there is a reduction to 10 or 12 games in the county championship,
it's 12. It's 12.
It'll be
12 games.
What's worth saying is that 10 has never been on the table.
For 10, yeah.
No.
Right. So reduction in 12 games of the county championship, and the Blast, every team will play 2 less games. Going by your article, the the 50 over competition will stay where it is.
Largely, just on that, there is a possibility that you could add a home game each. The non-100 hosting counties are concerned about the lack of cricket they have to offer in August. They have 4 days generally. One option is to have a championship game that month. You know that everyone knows the pros and cons of that. For me, that is it's hosting cricket, but it's not hosting great quality cricket necessarily. I think Nick's face.
Although, no, I think there's an interesting point on that. So I interviewed Simon Storey, Kent's chief executive, earlier this week for a piece about broadly the future of the Blast, actually, and where the Blast currently sits. But he made an interesting point, which was that look, best v best wise, a championship round during the 100 is not, does not tick that box. But interestingly, Kent, and Kent's certainly not alone in this, but it jogged my memory on it. A lot of counties now are getting more people in for some one-day cup games than they are for some of their Blast fixtures. And part of that, and of course a large part of that is down to position of the season, high summer, summer holidays, a full day of cricket rather than an evening of cricket in the week or whatever.
And the price.
And the price. The one thing that a championship round would do is it would, beyond just adding days of cricket, it would actually, if you market it properly and you do create that, I suppose, that like tribal us v them thing that does exist, consciously or subconsciously with counties with the 100, you could well get some really well attended county championship games, whether it was missing the 6 or 7 best players on the field or not. How that affects the integrity of the championship is the question that would have to be, fought against. But I think from that element, commercial element, and giving counties 4 days cricket and getting people through the gates, that could well work.
The other possibility was to add a game or two to the Royal London, or whatever it's called, Metro Bank, the 50 over competition, so that you get at least 5. Whether that would be enough to placate members who are going to lose days cricket, I fear. I doubt. But anyway, those are the discussions.
So tell me how the schedule is going to look next year in terms of how will the different tournaments sit alongside each other? Because one of the points Nick raised was, quoting Cam, all 3 tournaments are all, butchered in some regard. So how will these changes change?
It's not wildly different.
No.
The Blast will be before the 100, and the 50 over competition will be played at the same time as the 100.
So the T20 finals day will be before the start of the 100.
Good question.
Put it this way, it should be, and it should have been this year.
I think it is. I think the answer is yes. And the other thing that they were going to try and do is ensure that the 50 over final, well, they're talking about it being back at Lords.
That'd be good. That would
well,
be
would
good.
it? I mean, the reason it left is
do.
it didn't sell, but yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's.
I don't think moving it's going to make it increase.
No, but I know this isn't why. I know this is a minor point perhaps within it, but if you polled a bunch of cricketers and then asked which is a better ground to play white ball cricket on, sooner say Trent Bridge before Lords. But and Lords already has the 100 finals day.
Could you not have a situation? I mean, if we have this situation with the county championship where there is a final, right? Then that would have to take place at the home of the team that finished. I mean, how would that work?
Yeah, that's right. It takes place at the team that finished top.
And that is a good thing, I think. Because
so can you do that?
That mirrors the Shield.
Can you do that Can you do that? Yeah, exactly. Can you do that with a 50 over?
Well, you could, but I think there's something to be said for a Lord's final, the history and things.
Well, you were just saying that the reason that
there's a reason that there is a reason that they changed it. Yeah, there is. Trent Bridge is an excellent ground, and
it is.
I think the pros and cons. I don't think there are black and white answers necessarily here. Ideal. Let's be honest. Ideal went out of the system, went out of the possibilities as soon as you put a great big 100 in the middle of the summer. As soon as it took all the prime weeks, everything else had to compromise.
Yeah, and it's only going to get bigger. But anyway, we'll.
Just the point about the finals. I think there's a couple of nuances there. Like the county championship, if you're going to have a final, I think it's right that it's played at the home of the team that wins the county championship. Because ultimately, 12 4-day games is a lot of games on which to then go at the end of which you win it, and they go, by the way, you've not actually won it yet. You've got to play at a neutral venue against a team that might have finished 60 points behind you for the right to win it.
Yeah.
So much like the Sheffield Shield, it's right that it's played at the team that wins the group stage home ground, if there is to be a final. One Day Cup final, One Day Cup is very different because it is fundamentally, yes, the group stage, but it is then a knockout competition. It needs a neutral venue. For the final, I wouldn't have it at Lords. I've been at the One Day Cup finals at Trent Bridge. Quite frankly, you're not selling. Trent Bridge is a darn sight smaller than Lords, and they're not filling out Trent Bridge. And I don't think what the 50 over cup final, I don't think what the One Day Cup needs is a final played in front of, potentially a fifth or a quarter full ground that already hosts the men's and women's 100 finals. I don't see why Lords needs another final. And as I said, I don't think Lords is a particularly good ground for white ball cricket anyway. Trent Bridge, Edgbaston has its day. The Kia Oval's doing women's finals day. The One Day, I can't remember. I want to say the Utility Bowl is doing the women's One Day Cup final. I would spread it around. Not everything has to be.
I don't know. It makes it, having been to finals in all these places.
But you've got to remember though, when it was at Lords, it was, at least for a large portion, still either the pinnacle day in the calendar or the second pinnacle day in the calendar.
It was, and they tried all sorts of things to make it relevant, including, I think there was a Durham Somerset final. Is this right? Which was held under lights, and it meant that neither side supporters could get home.
Yeah.
So we've got to things. And so that's the problem with Southampton. Equally, you have a day-night final in Southampton. You come from Durham. Jesus Christmas. So, I say that in the middle of this T20 white ball series, which has been, the players of England and West Indies spent 7 hours on the coach on Saturday. It's not ideal, is it?
No.
But that is worth bearing in mind. That is part of the domestic schedule debate, because the England West Indies players have put up with that for 3-match T20 series. That is by and large how the T20 Blast works for 14 games played over 40 odd days. So there is absolutely methods to changing the schedule, and certainly where the Blast is concerned, to reducing the schedule, because it is crazy that is that is the preparation that players have between games on a summer-long basis, essentially.
You're listening or watching us on the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel, listening on talkSPORT 2. This is Following On County Cricketer. This is Following On County Cricketer. Myself, Jon Norman, George Dobell and Nick Friend. Let's talk about the Blast then, because, well, that's what we do. Northants, perfect record, 5 from 5. And not only that, they've beaten the teams who are in second, third and fourth. It's good to see them and Lancashire enjoying the tournament so far. It's a little bit more mixed and varied in the South Group. Where have you been, Nick, over the course of the last 7 days? Have you watched like 15 games?
No, I actually haven't, to be fair. I was at the Oval on Sunday to watch Surrey women properly dismantle Durham, chased 140, 13 overs, 1 down. I've actually not been at very much Blast. I've been at Lords twice. Once was a washout in the end. Once was, I think we've potted since then, the opening night of the competition. But I've watched an awful lot on streams and have kept across it, because it's the job. As George says, it's quite hard to get home from some of these games, unfortunately. But
it's quite hard to get in to some of these grounds, by the way. This is no criticism at all.
Is it?
No, what I'm about to say is no criticism at all. But, cricket outside the test grounds is actually quite difficult to cover from a broadcasting perspective, because, of course, the BBC have done a great job for decades, but they're so ingrained in the setup of the broadcasting situation. It's actually a lot of the grounds, the broadcast facilities, they only ever really needed space for the BBC and a TV broadcaster. So it's also quite difficult to get in. But I will be at Hampshire later on today. Sorry, carry on, Nick. I interrupted.
Well, you mentioned Northants. Like Northants just really. Is fun the right word? Is that dumbing it down too much? Their team is just they're interesting, because it's not because Ravi Mapara was the head coach of the Karachi Kings 3 weeks ago, and he's now the fifth leading run scorer in the Blast, and he's still going, and he whacked James Anderson out of the ground a few days ago. And yeah, got David Willey like in that role that feels quite old school T20 Cup, like open the bowling, back in the top four, just go in and belt it. Matthew Breetzke, who scored a load of runs last year, hasn't actually got a run this year, but he's like a top tier Blast overseas player. Then you've got Ben Sanderson at 6 for 8, I think it was a few days ago, which is wild. And also like I just think to go 5 from 5 in a competition where there is a lot of unpredictability, and say like the scheduling doesn't help things, is a really strong effort, particularly from a county who didn't have a very good championship block. And I suppose like by the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got Essex, who are winless in 4 in the South Group, who are really struggling, and I think they could really do with Jordan Cox back, which I think they will have this week. But yeah, I think Simon Harmer came out quite strongly, didn't he, not against his own players, but sort of a bit of a rallying cry a couple of days ago, because they are 4 losses from 4 games. But the weird thing about the Blast is that you can lose 7 group games and still win the competition. So, that is an inherent weirdness to it.
George, your thoughts? It's a very tricky tournament to keep on top of, especially when you're on international duty. I always find myself having watched a good 8 or 9 hours worth of cricket at whatever test ground, and then suddenly it's like, oh, and now for a Blast game. And you're like, oh, I tell you what, I love my cricket, but it's a push to watch another 4 hours of county of T20 Blast after I've just watched 8 or 9 hours of test cricket or ODI cricket.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen any yet. I've been in
Exhibit A.
I've been in Durham and Bristol, and it's not on TV, and there's a lot of travel in between. And I go everywhere by train, so I haven't seen anything yet. But I love the competition. I would personally, I'd have loved if they had made it promotion and relegation. This would have created more travel, and played it throughout the season, basically, on Friday night. It's a bit like they do in football. Not necessarily 3 o'clock on Saturday being the kickoffs, but Friday nights at 6:30 or whatever. I think that could have worked and would have alleviated a lot of the other pressures we have. But in a way, it's pointless to say it at this stage. We have the 100. I don't see it expanding, by the way. I don't think, much as a couple of counties may want to, I see there's no appetite for that from the owners. Anyway, we are where we are, and that's why we're talking about these domestic changes and everything. But I like the Blast. I think it needs a bit of a polish. It needs a bit of love and attention, but a better fixture list where you actually make it so that people can attend would be a good place to start. And on that, I think it's a shame. I understand why it's happened, but I think it's a shame that the Spectator isn't front and central in the discussions about what we're doing with the domestic season. I know that can be difficult and unwieldy, but they do.
What do you think the Spectator would say?
Well, I think you've got to be really, really careful, and that's one of the issues. I'll give you a really honest answer. One of the issues at the Cricket Supporters Association was they always wanted to have a mandate, and that meant they polled and they used surveys, and they made sure that when they represented, they had the facts. That made them slow. And so there was a split, which was basically I can't even remember what they're called, the County Members Association, whatever, who were more militant, and I don't necessarily mean that in a pejorative way, but they were much quicker and they were angrier, but they didn't actually have a mandate. And because of that, I think that the game has ignored them a bit. And I think that had the two organisations remained combined, they'd have had a lot more effect. The drive and natural passion within the county members reform group, whatever it's called, I'm sorry that I can't remember at the top of my head, it is admirable. And I think they do represent a lot of views, but they don't represent everyone's. And you've got to be so careful about the knee-jerk view, which is, let's remember a couple of years ago, county supporters derailed the Strauss plans. Now, I thought the Strauss plans were a whole load of hogwash, personally, but it did mean we ended up with this status quo, which is equally rubbish. So what they're doing now, I have more hope will end up with a sort of coherent structure, but it will be less cricket. And we've cut and cut and cut. And when you say, for example, well, we've never had a good structure. Well, actually, we did. We had two divisions playing 4-day cricket at the start of the century. Everyone played everyone home and away in the divisions. There was good promotion and relegation. And you know what? England started to win the Ashes. They started to win series. They went to number one in the world. It's not a coincidence. Get the county game right, the rest will follow, in my view. We went away from that for various reasons.
Colpack's helped as well.
Colpacks did help. You see, the Colpack, there's a balance about the Colpack argument. I mean, this is a dated argument. But, if you think I think Andy Flower's a Colpack, he needn't have been, but I think he was. Murray Goodwin and people like this.
Andre Adams.
You're right. Also, all sorts of players who were playing, they were lifting the standard. They undoubtedly were. The problem was when you had a game where there was something like 14 people. I think there was a Leicester Northants game.
Northampton.
Yeah.
14, I think, players who wouldn't have necessarily been qualified to play for England, then the balance has gone far too far. And the counties needed to have a responsible view to the way they used them, and they didn't always. And this is, the frustration with someone who loves county cricket and wants to see the counties flourish. The counties, when you look at the inclusion thing, they had 100 years or so to do something better with women's cricket, and they dropped the bloody ball. They did.
Yeah.
And the same with ethnic inclusion as well. So, I love the county game and I want to see it thrive. And what we're seeing now, I think actually we might end up with something better than what we have right now with these proposals.
Okay, that's good.
I'll say again, I do wish that the supporters were involved, because actually the enthusiasm, not just that it's good manners because they actually pay for all of us, and very directly they pay Nick and my wages, but actually they also have a lot of knowledge and enthusiasm. And what you see at the moment is the game make the same mistakes that they made in the past.
Guys, the other reason I agree with George on this and think that you need to involve the sports is actually you can take a lot of the emotion out of a debate like this if you get everyone understanding why people want to make certain decisions. But to supporters right now, they will look at this and go, they want to make cuts for cuts' sake, and eventually these cuts will lead to the championship becoming 10 games and 8 games, and then it'll just be a festival month, and then there'll be no red ball cricket at all. And for what it's worth, 10 games was never on the table, was never even discussed for this round. But by doing it secretively, if that's the right word, and by not involving people, you allow people to make their own minds up. I've written relentlessly over the last 2 years about the player welfare side of it, because forget the sports for a second. The player welfare stuff wasn't being heard at ECB level, that even within even among decision makers. So you do need to involve everyone in it, because actually the only way you take the emotion out of it and you get to a consensus that people can agree on and understand is if people know why you're making decisions. Whereas the way that the game has behaved in the last decades, particularly, but before then as well, and the way the 100 came to be and stuff like this, is because there's no transparency, because no one knows why things have happened. Everyone allows everyone else to make their own minds up for, and if you've got an inherent red ball bias, for example, you look at it and go, oh, they'd reduce the championship because in time they want to make, because the 100 is going to get bigger. And as George said, that's not necessarily on the table. You want to get rid of 2 blast games because you want to kill some of the counties who can't live without them. That's also not the case. Simon Story, in this interview I did with him this week, specifically said, if I was still selling 7 home games, I could sit here and say, no, we can't reduce these. But the reality is they're not selling 7 home games. But so there's a lot that could be ironed out and understood and liaised around and even agreed on if people were willing to sit down with each other and involve everyone in the process and say, this is why we want this. Why do you want that? Where is the middle ground? And if there isn't a middle ground, this is why it is so important that we do this, rather than hitting everyone in July with bang, here's the schedule, surprise, whether you like it or not, this is it. Because
that's certainly that. Since we've been talking, I've had a couple of messages from county chief execs. One of them saying, "You've put the cat among the pigeons." But of course, that was the point. It was the point, because I felt that the people didn't really know what was going on, and I thought they had a right to know.
Well, they're not. It sounds to me like they're not asking for the fans' perspective, and maybe not even asking the counties yet.
No, the counties are absolutely. The counties are making this decision. Let's be really clear about that.
They will, but they are given the options, though, aren't they?
No, the counties have a steering group. This is county chief execs mainly, and they're coming up with the options. Now, some of them have liaised with their supporters. They really have. Whether they've told them we're at this stage, well, I don't think they had they? But some of them had gone through at least the motions of talking to their supporters and telling them that this was going on. But I think it was important to let people know that what was going on. That was all, because otherwise it was going to be a fait accompli. And I completely agree with what Nick said. A lot of this stuff isn't as unreasonable as it sounds. Not saying I support it, but if they were able to get that message out there. Look, the difference right now is I genuinely believe the people running English cricket have good intentions. I do. It doesn't mean that I always agree with them. You know, I loathe the 100 for what it's done to English cricket in many ways, but I understand where they were and what they've inherited. And I think they do want a better competition. They do care about player welfare. They do want England to succeed. And there is
they're trying to do the best job.
They are. So it's not just about cutting, but there's a lot of cynicism out there. And I think the cynicism in history is well earned. But these aren't. This is not Colin Graves and co. They're well intentioned, trying to do the best thing for English cricket.
We're running out of time a little bit, but I should just say George, Nick, and the rest of the cricketers' team are dedicated to covering county cricket in more depth than anyone else. I think that is quite evident, with reporters on the ground at every round of fixtures this summer, as well as the Blaster course. Good coverage of that. Why not try their award-winning news, features and insight on all 18 counties for just £1, which is a ridiculously small amount of money, by visiting thecricketer.com/digital. And just before we get to the break, is there any chance, George, that fresh from starring in England's first overseas Ashes triumph in 16 years, 15, 16 years, Shoaib Bashir might find himself without a county next year?
Yeah. It's funny you should say. Saka, the South Asian Cricket Academy, has 60 players on its ranks at the moment. Amazing number. And there are the depth of spin talent is incredible.
Wow.
And they cannot get a sniff because of the role of spinners in contemporary cricket. So, it's a really good question.
You'd think that Bashir would get a contract, because even he's obviously in a different situation because it's one of these shadow deals, isn't it? And
so it shouldn't be a risk for anyone to sign.
No, and also,
he's paid by the ECB, extended contracts.
There are also, but let's step back from there. Like, there are also counties who need a frontline spinner,
but they want one that can bat.
They do.
I think we've got to repeat. Was it Ollie Rayner? The famous line when he was asked, I'm a
how to become better off spinner
in my career. You learn to bat.
And
it's largely right. And Shoaib obviously isn't a great batter. He's okay in the field, but he's not. What's his name? The leggy at Somerset stayed on the staff for several years because he was such an incredible fielder.
Max Waller.
Sorry, again, getting old, mate, getting old. Could that happen with Shoaib? Yeah, it's just about possible. But as Nick said, I think anything could happen with Shoaib's career. If you'd gone back 4 years, you could have asked that question about any Verdi. Admittedly, he didn't take 50 Test wickets and all the rest of it, but it's incredible.
This is the thing that's intriguing with Bashir, because he's got this England record. There will surely be a counter that goes, do you know what? Like, there's no smoke without fire. He's taking wickets for England for fun. It's always been an awkward one at Somerset. And for what it's worth, I don't think anyone has done anything wrong. England picked a guy on his potential. Somerset have picked England's previous spinner as their number one spinner. But it was also Somerset who gave Shoaib Bashir a chance in professional cricket.
It was, that's really important.
I don't think anyone's failed anyone.
No, and Shoaib does average something like 75 ballpark.
Yeah, completely.
A wicket for Somerset.
Yeah, and worse for Glamorgan, where he was on loan earlier this season. It's not. I don't think anyone has done anything wrong. But I do think someone will go, do you know what? There's this guy who's taking all these Test wickets. They're not different sports. Like he must, if we get him on our books and we use him, we've got the chance. He's going to come good. And it can't be. And I think the problem he's had at Somerset is there's never been the regular chance to play. He's played sometimes, but when he's played, he's been one of 3 or 4 spinners often.
Well,
And
what might have been helpful is if there hadn't been such an emotional response to Somerset preparing turning tracks and an understanding that half of the winter tours that England go on, learning to play bowl and bat on such tracks is quite useful. Now, Don Best got selected for England on the back of playing on turning tracks. Well, Jack Leach too, of course.
yeah,
I don't think it would have been so bad to have one of the first-class counties having significantly helpful pitches for spinners. I mean, the alternative is to have people like Josh Davey opening the batting and bowling. And is that going to help English cricket? So I thought that the reaction to the turning wickets at Taunton was immature, hysterical, and actually showed a lack of knowledge, because we see wickets like that all the time when we go to Asia in particular.
George, Nick, thank you for your time this week. As brilliant
Pleasure,
as ever.
Hope you're feeling better, mate.
I'm fine. What are you talking about?
We know.
I'm in rude health. I've never been better.
Have they given you your own room in Southampton specifically because of your troubles?
And my own room here at talkSPORT, you can see. It's just
with
me.
a blue flashing light through most of that. I was wondering,
the blue flashing light. It's going to come to all of us.
Can I tell you a weird story?
Disco or an ambulance?
Can I tell you a weird story? I was in a hotel room in Bengaluru, which had a mirrored ceiling. Yeah, completely mirrored. Yeah.
Yeah, which you asked for.
With neon lighting around it. Now, I'd gone out for dinner that night with Chris Silverwood. I'm tempted to put these pictures up, and told him about it. And he said, "What? This is ridiculous." And I said, "I'll send you a picture when I get home." I could not take a picture that didn't look like I was kind of trying to seduce him. It was me lying on a bed with pink lighting in a mirror. I never sent that picture, but I do have them on my phone, and I kind of feel like I put them on Twitter now.
Well, there is actually a good Twitter site, People Selling Mirrors, which doesn't sound like a good. Might not sound like a good Twitter site, but it is. We have reached the end of the show.
Does that cost £1 a month?
No, free.
Well, it's even cheaper. That's probably backfired.
Yeah, shouldn't have mentioned that. This is Following On, County Cricketer.